Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled you're here today because we are tackling a topic that touches almost every single one of us. And honestly, it completely shifts the way we view our own personal growth. Today, we're looking at the trap of the wounded identity. Now, if you've been through trauma, and let's be real, most of us have in some form or another, acknowledging that fact absolutely matters. Feeling the pain of what you went through and understanding how those experiences shaped the way you move through the world, that is essential. But there is a massive, profound difference between healing from your trauma and organizing your entire identity around the fact that you were wounded. So today, we're going to explore exactly what happens when you get trapped by your own history, how it holds you back, and most importantly, how to finally break free.
All right, before we get too deep into the weeds, I want to try something a little different. I want to ask you to just pause for a second, drop your defenses, and take a really honest look at your own life. When you meet someone new, how long does it take for you to bring up your past trauma, your anxieties, or your struggles? Do you instinctively use your wounds as a way to connect with people? It's totally okay if the answer is yes, but I want you to be consciously aware of it. Because if your pain has become your primary introduction to the world, you really need to understand the psychological trap you might be caught in right now.
Okay, let's dive into this. We really need to look at this critical distinction: healing from trauma versus organizing your identity around it. Like we just said, acknowledging what shaped you is the absolute foundation of any psychological growth. You just can't skip that step. But the danger creeps in when that trauma becomes the primary filter for your reality. Think about it. When you start making everyday choices through the filter of your wound, forming relationships through that filter, and interpreting the entire world literally through the lens of what was done to you, well, you're no longer just healing. You're basically building a house inside your pain and deciding to live there permanently. This actually brings us to a brilliant insight inspired by Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist. Jung never questioned the need to feel your pain or understand your history, but he asked this profound question that just cuts right through all the noise. What happens when the wound becomes the very center of your identity? You see, our modern therapy culture often completely ignores this risk. People spend years and years talking about their history, and they call it doing the work. But Jung was brutally clear on this point. Articulating your wounds with incredible precision, perfectly understanding your trauma, is fundamentally different from actually healing from it. If the story of what happened to you becomes the most important story you ever tell, you are deeply, deeply stuck. Now, what's really interesting here is this concept of victim consciousness. And let me be super clear right off the bat. When Jung and other psychological frameworks talk about this, they aren't using the word victim to shame anyone. Not at all. It's used to describe a specific orientation, like a low-frequency psychological loop. It's a mindset that quietly dictates a very specific limiting rule. What was done to me determines what is possible for me. It's that underlying belief that what happened back then completely shapes who you are today and exactly who you will be tomorrow. And when you operate at that frequency, your potential is always going to be capped by your past. So, why do we do it, right? Why do we stay in this low frequency loop? Well, here is kind of the darkest, most uncomfortable truth about the wounded identity. We unconsciously resist moving on because there are real, tangible benefits to staying there. When you're the wounded one, people tend to treat you more gently. When you fail, it instantly makes sense to everyone around you. You get to belong to this very validating community of shared pain. You've got a built-in explanation for why things are hard. And perhaps most significantly, you don't have to take full responsibility for who you're becoming because you can always just point backward to what you went through. Now, I want to emphasize this with complete empathy. This isn't malicious. It is deeply, deeply human. But man, it will keep you stuck in that loop for the rest of your life if you let it. I mean, think about the absolute irony of our modern self-help culture for a second. We literally have millions of people who have spent thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of hours and dollars in therapy. They possess like PhD-level vocabularies about their attachment styles, their specific micro-triggers, and their childhood conditioning. They can analyze themselves perfectly. Yet, their lives haven't actually changed in a decade. They haven't genuinely healed. They've just become highly educated curators of their own damage. It's like they've built an entire museum dedicated to their trauma, and they've made themselves the permanent head tour guide. Let's move to how this builds into an actual actionable solution. Because if you are serious about genuine psychological evolution, you must release the wounded identity. And releasing it doesn't mean pretending the harm didn't happen. It doesn't mean minimizing what you went through or performing some fake toxic toughness. Actually, it's about following a path of integration. First, you absolutely must grieve what happened. Second, you integrate the lessons from it. Third, you intentionally release the identity of being the wounded one. And fourth, you claim your authorship. That means becoming someone who carries what happened without being defined by it. You have scars, yes, for sure, but you are no longer organized around those scars. And doing that leads to the ultimate shift in human consciousness. It's the shift from constantly asking, why am I this way because of what happened, to asking, who am I becoming in spite of it? Or even better, who am I becoming through it? Transitioning your internal focus from past harm to present becoming is quite literally one of the highest frequencies a human consciousness can ever reach. It requires immense courage. It requires you to claim full authorship of your own life, even when, and especially when, you have very legitimate, totally valid reasons not to. So the crucial point is simply this. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. The wounded identity is a weight that might have made perfect sense at one point to help you survive a terrible situation, but today, it is actively preventing you from accessing a higher level of life. You don't grow by just pasting positive thinking on top of a victim identity. You grow by letting that victim identity completely die. Stop organizing your life around your scars. Step into the fierce, untouchable power of a person who is writing their own future instead of endlessly rereading their past. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the ultimate test of your psychological integration. I want you to look inward and really ask yourself, are your past wounds still the bold headline of your life? Or have they finally just become a chapter in a much larger, much more fascinating story? You'll know you've healed when your trauma history is no longer the very first thing you share, when it's no longer the most defining thing about you. So I'm challenging you today. Be brave enough to leave your truth in the comments below. Claiming exactly where you are right now is the very first step to taking your power back. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Go out there, write your future, and I'll see you next time.